This foray into blue is sponsored by Squarespace. IBM, Big Blue, they were the ones who instigated, who created the very platform that most of us use for our desktop endeavours. Its open architecture helped it become a great success, but it was also, in the context of IBM's business, a great failure. The Personal System 2 then, released in 1987, was IBM's attempt to recapture some of the market that it had lost to rivals creating compatible machines, with Compaq being the most formidable. These new machines gave us futuristic-looking designs, coupled with proprietary hardware designed to bring consumers more firmly under the IBM wing. This proved popular with business buyers familiar with IBM's sales reps, but penetrated less so into the home markets, with consumers opting for cheaper and often higher-spec competitor machines.
So, if I tell you that Compaq have made the world's most advanced desktop computer from 386 chips and 32 bits of a bus, you'll think me unreliable. So I'm not going to do this ad. I've got a reputation to think of.
The Compaq Desk Pro 386, chips, buses and compatibility.
IBM then needed a way to expand again, to create the same sort of personal computer growth they had witnessed in the early 80s. And one of the ways they saw this happening was through the portable computer market. The problem was, IBM were already making portable computers, and compared to the competition, they were pretty abysmal. Bulky, unimaginative and late to market weren't really key selling points, especially for executives out and about looking for something small and reliable to work away from the office. And this is something competitors were somewhat struggling with as well, although their offerings were quite a bit cheaper.
Now, the fish weighs 22 pounds, which makes it extremely portable. It will fit snugly on the passenger seat of your car or when travelling by train on the luggage rack. By coincidence, the computer weighs exactly the same, so nothing to choose between them so far.
But there was one man who had a vision, and it wasn't John Cleese, it was an IBM employee named Jim Canavino. The book ThinkPad, A Different Shade of Blue by Deborah Dell and Jerry Purdy documents how Jim would eventually do the groundwork for the IBM ThinkPad line. One of IBM's long-awaited success stories, but there were a few developments needed before that to pave the way.
The world was desperate for a desktop replacement laptop. I felt that portables had a chance to provide the PC company with a sustainable foundation. I knew that it would eventually be an individual's only personal computer. I thought there was a whole niche that would run with just portables. That has certainly turned out to be true.
Hey everybody, the new computers are here.
New computers? Who, may I ask, authorized new computers?
Yeah, who?
Canavino had convinced IBM to eschew their traditional 3-year development cycle and instead run with one lasting only a year. To do this, a skunkworks team was assembled to work separately from the main company, and IBM's Yamato lab in Japan were brought in for design. The outcome of this was the PS2 P70, an IBM that was in the marketplace at the right time, and because of that became the number 2 selling luggable in the market, second only to Compaq.
Compaq's new Portable 2 computer. It's such a marvellous machine that it would be quite unfair to compare it with another computer. So we've decided to compare it with this fish.
IBM went from a $1.4 billion loss in 1988 to $1.2 billion profit in 1989, with the PS70 contributing significantly toward that. The P70 was followed by the P75, but there was an issue. Compaq had again delivered not just something that fitted consumers' needs, but was redefining consumers' needs.
Compaq believe their computer simply works better. Before you do the spade work, ask your dealer why.
In October 1989, the Compaq Lite, based around an 8086 processor, and the Lite 286 were introduced. what most would consider to be the first notebook computers, weighing in at just £6 compared to the £22 of IBM's P75 luggable. Overnight, it made IBM's portable range seem like cumbersome desktop machines. Business customers quickly began asking their IBM reps when their notebook would be coming out, and once again, it was down to Canavino to step up to the task, with Bob Lawton leading the team, the result of which was the L40SX laptop, released in the USA on March 26, 1991. Of course, marketing was key to selling the L40SX, and that's no different for your business or brand. Squarespace gives you the tools you need to create a website quickly, easily, and most importantly, professionally. There are scores of templates to choose from, and even then, you can customize it as much as you want. Create a blog, create a shop, create a dynamic photo gallery. Everything you need to make an appealing proposition for your audience. Drop on by to squarespace.com/nostalgianerd to get started for absolutely free. Then, when you're ready to publish a site or custom domain, just use the code nostalgianerd for 10% off. Now, as you can tell by this example, it's still a fairly sizable beast, and it's not just because IBM couldn't condense their technology into a smaller package. It was down to a fear that had resided in the company since the PC Junior. You see, the PC Junior came with a different kind of keyboard, a tiny keyboard, a chiclet keyboard, and consumers, well, they despised it. It was intended to be sleek, modern, and allow for various keyboard overlay templates to be inserted, which could help the user with text-driven environments. But it bit them in the arse, and IBM did not want that to happen again. So the L40SX is fitted with as good a keyboard as they could muster, and it's for that reason that both the keyboard and laptop are larger than Compaq's offering. Of course, the real solution was somewhere between the two, and Compaq had already worked that out by integrating a smaller but still highly usable keyboard into the Lite. But IBM did perhaps get this component exactly right for die-hard keyboard fanatics, and we'll take a closer look at how in a minute. The increased case space also meant that the L40 had enough room for some mighty processing power. The top laptop in the original Lite lineup was a 12MHz 286, but under this baby's hood is a mighty Intel 386SX running at 20MHz, substantially faster, and with up to 18MB of onboard RAM and the optional 387SX coprocessor. The case allowed for a NiCad battery with more than average running time and a plethora of ports, including PS2, 25-pin parallel, 9-pin serial, a VGA out, and an external expansion connector, all of which are covered up with these nicely contained flaps. And all of this is held within just 7.7 pounds, which makes it not too much heavier than Compaq's offering, and it was actually enough for a lot of media outlets to classify it as a notebook computer, with measurements of just over 2 inches high, just under 11 inches long, and 13 inches wide. However, according to Deborah Bell and Jerry Purdy, this actually puts it outside of even IBM's stated maximum notebook measurements of 2 by 9 by 12 inches. Now, although it feels long, it's still a nicely constructed machine, and it's pleasing to look at. Everything is tucked away, everything is neat and clean. It was also the first laptop to use a row of LCD indicators rather than LEDs. Not only was this easier on the battery, it also provides visual feedback with icons for the modem, speaker, battery level, humidity, which is pretty neat and will alert you if you're outside of normal operating levels, temperature, hard drive, disk drive, numlock, caps lock, screen and suspend modes. And it honestly looks pretty cool, with the LCDs blacked out if there's nothing to report. The power switch is nearby and accessible, with an A/M switch the other side for selection between manual or automatic mode. Curious. In automatic mode, the hardware initiates low clock speed during idle periods. In manual, it runs at the standard or a predefined speed as long as it needs to. The 10-inch VGA screen itself is a black-on-white monochrome super twisted pneumatic LCD, capable of supporting up to 32 grayscales. It's 10mm thick and has a cold fluorescent sidelight which produces some nice colours at odd angles. Thankfully, the built-in brightness and contrast help with your viewing pleasure, even at some obscure angles, and this is a totally respectable setup for the time. What's most noticeable though, or I should say least noticeable, is just how quiet this thing is. The 250MB hard drive, which is upgraded from the standard 60, is barely audible and sounds more like, I don't know, a distant triangle being played by a lone band member. Doesn't sound like a mechanical drive at all really, and that's in stark contrast to the floppy drive, which feels jarring and abrupt amid this serene landscape. So after a memory check confirming the 2MB of onboard RAM, the PC boots directly into the IBM DOS shell, a standard feature of PC-DOS, which of course is the standard OS here, being an IBM machine. PC-DOS 6.3 to be precise, although originally this PC would have shipped with PC-DOS 3.3, 4 or even 5 on later models. By 6.3, PC-DOS had diverged from MS-DOS and was doing its own thing with different apps for RAM optimization, editing, and the like. And talking of editing, which is brought up by just typing E, it gives me a chance to demonstrate just how beautiful the standard 84-85 key keyboard is, not just in its construction but also its feel. This is, by a country mile, the nicest laptop keyboard I have ever had the pleasure of typing on. It's so nice that it seemingly reduced my normal typing error level by about half. It's like skipping over a still surface of highly resistant water. Of course, being a laptop, there are no switches here. Instead, we get a rubber dome under each key which buckles with exquisite certainty, allowing you to feel utterly connected with the letters you are typing. IBM were keen to get this right, and boy, did they nail it. I have no doubt that this helped sell the laptop, and sell it did. According to ThinkPad, a different shade of blue, IBM had projected to sell about 30,000 of these machines by the end of the first year, but in the end sold over 100,000 and selling significantly more thereafter. So despite Compaq's offering, it was very much a success, especially when you consider that the retail price for each was nearly $6,000, just over $11,000 in today's money. But then, this is very much a business machine aimed at getting businesses mobile. It was designed for executives working from hotels or around a conference table, so big budgets were pretty standard. It certainly wasn't designed for gaming, as you can see from Paperboy 2 here. The blur on this screen is worse than anything you might have experienced on a Game Boy or Game Gear in the 90s, but at least the PC speaker is pleasant, especially combined with some clever use of it like Paperboy 2 employs. It almost feels like there's a sound card on board. That's a very good PC speaker. If you really did want to game on it, then something like Overlord or Supremacy is much more at home. Naturally, it has no trouble running with the 386 processor, and if you wanted to connect it up to an external monitor, then, well, the world is your oyster. But it's not meant for that, it's meant for this. And to aid with that, a few add-ons were available. One of them is a numeric keypad which can be connected easily via the side port, where an optional modem port can also be placed, and it allows you to enter numbers quickly, like that bookie on The Running Man taking rapid bets. You could also get this rather quirky trackpoint mouse that could be used both as a trackball or a standard mouse depending on your desk, or lack of. Like a lot of PS2 machines, the BIOS is a fiddly affair, and settings are tweaked from booting a reference disk rather than built-in controls. From here you can run numerous machine tests. You can set the speed of a processor, say if you wanted to run some old software that was upset by the fast pace of the CPU. And that is linked to the A&M switch I mentioned earlier. You can even change the speed of the keyboard repeat, which is a good level of control. Impressively, this is one of the first machines to also incorporate automatic power management features, allowing you to adjust screen, drive timeouts and the like. Not only that, if you close the lid in use, the current applications are suspended, as you'd get on a modern day computing device, leaving only the system memory and real-time clock operational. Pretty neat. Honestly, if I had this laptop in 1991, I'd be as happy as a pig in grot. But then for $6,000, you'd hope so. The question is, were IBM happy? Was this the success they'd hoped? They'd accrued more sales than they expected, so yes, but by this point they weren't hoping for the world, and honestly they didn't quite get it. The L40SX wasn't the saviour of IBM, but it did pave the path for other machines, and it played its part more than you might think. Some pre-production prototypes of the L40SX were actually created in black rather than this standard PS2 pearl cream colour. They also had a built-in trackpoint pointing stick and a 10.4-inch full-colour TFT display. And you know what other laptops had those features? That's right, the N51SX, N51SLC and CL57SX. What is this? Those aren't ThinkPads. Where's the ThinkPads? What, these came first? Really? Okay, so it turns out that the first laptops that IBM rolled off in their sensational new black livery were less than sensational, and they didn't have those red striking pointing nubs. But despite their black colour, these were actually called Me Too products by the press, once again trailing behind the competition, but at least you could finally classify them as a notebook without question. Their release was questionable, almost like a tentative test step into waters, because just a couple of months later, in October 1992, IBM would finally release the ThinkPad, and this really did change the fortunes of the company, incorporating many of the features of the L40, including its patented power-saving controls.
See, now this is what it's like to fly first class.
And this seems lucky, some say suspiciously lucky, because in May 1993, just 3 months after the L40SX was discontinued, IBM issued a recall for some 150,000 of them after 15 separate short circuits were reported, all of which were oddly from Europe. It seems that owing to damaged insulation, a hole could be burnt in the machine's casing. IBM offered to repair systems worldwide for free, but recommended that users remove the battery and power only through the AC adapter. Why this took 2 years to emerge as an issue seems strange. Perhaps IBM were keeping hush until their new products came out and no one cared. Or maybe the degradation just took its time. A bit worrying given I'm using one that's 30 years old. Let's hope it was a repaired model perhaps, because sadly there aren't many of these beasts left in the wild. most of them scrapped by the businesses that bought them. The L40SX may have been a stepping stone, but it was a stepping stone with a damn nice keyboard, and if you get a chance to try one out, I wholly recommend it. Until next time, I've been Nostalgia Nerd. Toodaloo.